The debate last night was. I started watching it, and then
Who was in this one?
the big two were Bernie and Elizabeth Warren,
Right.
and it seems that they dominated everything. There was a great moment where Bernie, one of the guys, was trying to challenge Bernie by saying, "You don't about the healthcare. You don't know it's going to happen that way. You don't know."
Oh,
that.
yeah. And he
Bernie
wrote
just
the
goes,
bill.
I wrote the damn bill.
I wrote the damn bill. I was there.
And Elizabeth Warren's one of her big things, and this is something I want to talk to you about politics about. She basically said it, and I'm paraphrasing. Why would anyone try and run? Because she was talking about all the Democrats who are kind of moderate, and who are basically saying
Establishment.
Yeah, and she goes, I don't know why anyone would run for president to try and not achieve big things, because it seems that what's coming out, and I think that you look at, for example, in America, the right blocking Obama's pick for the Supreme Court, the right giving trillions of dollars worth of tax breaks. The right in America seems to be able to achieve big things, and the left doesn't. Yeah. And so the left is saying we want free healthcare for all, and then half of the left is going, oh, better not do that, can't do that. People, but the right just goes, we're going to do this.
Yeah, and they do.
We're going to do this. And
good point, Pat.
Does that fly over here? Like I didn't
There
read
is
too
some of
much.
that.
I saw Simon Bridges say the other day something about 200 million towards
Cancer.
Yeah,
40 million a year.
That's a pretty big idea. Is it something that we see? I think the left and the right in America are a bit different. I think the left in America is probably more centrist, and I like in our scale, and I think the right is more far right.
And have a look at what. On the surface, what Simon is proposing on the surface is not for a conservative right-wing ideology. He's framing it as in we care about healthcare.
Yeah.
So that's actually digging into inclusive and progressive values, right?
Well, that was a thing where I would talk to my American friends and contacts when we had John Key as Prime Minister, and how I would say he supports this, and this. Like same-sex marriage, totally. Interest-free student loans, like these things that are saying, and he's our right-wing Prime Minister, and these right-wing American guys, their heads would go boom, because in their eyes they're all far left. So I don't think we've got the same makeup with our left versus right. But I'm still wondering if in the New Zealand cycle
there are echoes.
Is there a belief? Is there a an understanding that the right can get big things achieved, and the left, I think the left the world over, tends to be more fractured than the right. The right tends to be more, I'm on message, this is consensus.
Yeah, I'm going to agree with that.
So does that mean, because there is the potential of it being more fractured, I mean, you could even just say fractured as in the Greens and Labour are separated. That's not necessarily a bad fracture, but they're not the same party.
Yeah, sure.
So is it harder to get big things done if you're on the left?
Yeah. So it's not that. So I want to acknowledge that around the world for 40, 50 years, conservative narrative has dominated. Conservative narratives and framing of values have dominated, and progressive has not done good enough. We have not done well. We've got to get better at that. And we're starting to, with the likes of Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, the Squad, Sanders, Corbyn, Progressives Australia, Greens, Marine Faruqi, who I met only weeks ago. So progressive leadership is starting to get its crap together. Our messaging has not been clear, strong and uncompromised like conservative messaging has been. And we've got to do better at that and be strong and bold in our... You're so right. I agree that when the right go out, they don't care. They just go do it. Most bizarre things.
But even if they don't do it, they promise big things. Now, as I'm talking, I'm also thinking I'm going to contradict my own idea there, because when Auntie Helen was in, that was when things like interest-free student loan, and they're big ideas, and then they're so big that National had to then support them, because if they said, and what was it, working for families, interest-free student loans, they were the big Helen Clark things. If National had to come in saying we're going to get rid of those, they wouldn't, that would have been terrible. So maybe because they were so big, They had to be adopted by the right because they're big ideas.
Goes to show that when you put up something truly progressive that people can automatically connect heart and mind to, it's going to get some traction. We need to make it impossible for people to oppose. We need to make it impossible, and we need to stand clear in our boots on the front line of those values and those policies and solutions. Absolutely. And we've got to get better at that.
So what's the big things that the left in New Zealand need to do? I mean, we've got an election coming up next year. Some of it's interesting that some of your lovely colleagues in politics are avoiding us this year, aren't they, Jace? But I'm sure next year when we make the invite out there, they'll be here in a heartbeat.
Oh, I love you guys. How would anyone want to avoid you?
So when they're coming through next year for the election year, what are the big things that the left has to do, has to promise, and then has to get through?
Move away from housing as a commodity, approach housing as homes for people to goddamn.
How do we do that?
We haven't been able to interrupt the market, which has been failing. We've got to get bold.
CGT?
Progressive tax.
Can I give you the answer for the CGT?
You want to give me... Go. Do it.
So the problem with what's happening with the CGT, the capital gains tax at the moment, and the issue why it fell over is people were saying, hang on, for a long time in New Zealand, our retirement schemes have been crap. So I've put money into housing to protect me for retirement, and now you're telling me I'm going to lose a bunch of that. So here's what we do, right? When KiwiSaver came in, there is a line of demarcation that you kind of go, houses bought before KiwiSaver came in are exempt. Don't care if you own 1, 2, 5, 10 or 20, because they're exempt because it was a different system. Since KiwiSaver came in, our politicians, our government has said we are now going to figure out a way to give you a proper retirement. Houses purchased after that, the second house, are not exempt of CGT. Game over, done.
Yeah. So the family home was never going to.
No, I agree. But the second home after, because what's happening is there's all these 70-year-olds now who are going, hang on, this is my retirement.
We didn't sell it enough. We didn't talk about it properly.
But if you use that KiwiSaver as a line of demarcation, then you're protecting the 70-year-olds who have done what they've done in the housing market to provide for their retirement. But you're saying to people like me, if this is the way you're going to do it when you're 70, there's going to be a tax on it, because we do provide you another way of doing it through KiwiSaver.
Yeah, and because we want to stop the large-scale investors and speculators, not what is termed as mum and dad ownership. Sure. That's not what we're after here. We're after the 30, 100, 500 homeowners, 500 homes owned by, one investment property or one person. That's what we want to interrupt.
Does that exist?
Oh, sadly.
Really?
Sadly.
That is crazy.
That's wrong. It's morally and fiscally wrong. It's not sustainable. Well, that's why we're locked out.
Here's another thing, though. There are parts of the world where home ownership is not considered necessarily like we go back to Spain, for example. Yeah, Europe. There are people Denmark. Who just, there's expectation that we're just going to rent our whole life. And it's not like a can't afford, it's just the way that those people live.
Thank you.
So how does that fit into your home ownership model?
So home ownership cannot be the only model. There also needs to be a massive upscale build of public and community housing. And I'm glad you brought it up. Renters' rights. So renting can no longer be a second-class citizen option. It's got to be a valid option. You talked about people being worried about their retirement. What if you didn't have to worry that when you got to the age, you didn't need a whole house to keep you enduring and thriving?
Yeah.
What if we could all just understand that we were going to be looked after and live good lives and didn't fret about whether we owned a home or not to do it? Renting needs to be secure and affordable and healthy, for goodness sake. That's the least we can expect. At the moment, the rental market, it's running wild. It's Wild West out there. It's terrible. People cannot afford it. Unions are telling me that some of their members are paying, this is ridiculous, are paying up to 85% of their income on rents. And that's not a mansion. And that's not necessarily a healthy home either. 65% of your income on rent is massively a struggle, and too many people are there. But actually, we want it I want to get things down to 50%, if I'm honest about it. So that's going to require some sort of transparency around rent increases. I'm avoiding the word rent control. Some sort of transparency around rent increases, and some security of tenure, so that if you can feel like you can actually put some roots down and literally grow some gardens and do some weeding and have your kids go to the same school for more than a year, that's going to be good again for all of us. But some massive levers have to change.